Why crisis can bring out the best in us. Crisis can be difficult to manage, but if we manage to handle them right, we can come out even stronger on the other side. The word crisis comes from the Greek verb krino, which means I judge and choose. This concept suggests a choice or a moment in which we are faced with different perspectives and possibilities. Honors, 1900. We can see crisis as a process of natural homeostasis between a person and his environment. We achieve a balance by changing the weights on our scales or by changing our frames. This can therefore give us the opportunity to create changes that enable new forms of adaptation. What differentiates the functionality of a person or a family is not the absence of crises, but how they have dealt with them. We can also look at how these crises have contributed to personal and family growth and development. There are also events that, due to their nature or when they occur, can simply be too much for us and cause us harm. The types of human crises. During life, each person has to face a number of critical moments, which we can classify in different ways. In general, we can classify these critical moments into two types. Normative, expected. These are specific to the normal life cycle and expected: marriage, looking for work or housing, retirement, etc. Non-normative, unexpected. These refer to circumstantial, unpredictable, unintended, and unexpected crises resulting from one or more events. Since these incidents happen suddenly, they require an immediate response. So a person's or family's crisis may or may not be predictable, but they all have one thing in common. The problem that caused them is very difficult to solve. As far as mental health is concerned, the results of any given crisis are the same, but the personal experience varies. What determines a crisis? We are not isolated people having personal crises in our own watertight bubble. We can group the factors that determine the development of these crises into three types. The severity of the events that triggered the crisis. Family resources, flexible roles, socio-economic and functional characteristics. Care, emotional support. Social supports, family, friends, community or other people who can help minimize any harmful effects. There are different theories that try to explain these crises by applying different focal points. They are the theory of vital events, the cognitive theory, the theory of coping mechanisms, and the theory of reactivation of past events. Novisk, 1978, cited by Slate-Koo, 1996, suggests that the likelihood of an event producing a crisis depends on a number of factors. These include the moment it occurs, its intensity, its duration, and the extent to which it affects a person's development. Man, a resilient species. The human race seems to have been constantly trying to recover from relentless wars, massive crises, disasters, and violence since the dawn of time. Crises leave their scars and pass from generation to generation. They also have a lasting impact on our minds and emotions. Why are some people who experience a crisis not severely affected while others are? The reason is related to one of the biggest problems in mental health: their chronicity. In other words, the repetition of critical events in one's life as well as having few resources to deal with them. Every crisis is a message for our lives. Everyone who experiences a crisis receives a message for their life. The message is, or may not be, processed consciously, but it becomes part of the script of a person's life. Kaplan wrote about his interest in what happens to the subject in the first 3 days of the crisis. He examined how this combined with a description of the crisis and how it affects their cognitive functioning. Dira Groh also wrote about this topic. you realize that the combination of these elements can explain the variation in different people's adaptation mechanisms. How we assimilate the impressions of these critical moments is ultimately projected into the future script of our lives. It is impossible to escape from what we feel and what these events mean to us. Later, however, we can change these impressions with new, more positive messages. The different ways in which the basic needs of a person are present after these crises make it difficult to build a generalized negative script. It is also important to consider the conclusion that a person has reached about a given crisis. When someone has a crisis, we should not think of them as victims. The victims of these crises had to deal with these events and move on with their lives. We are not talking about victims. However, we are talking about great survivors.